Good afternoon. Welcome to our November 14th Bpm'online user group. Today we're going to be talking about creating custom sections in Bpm'online. Your hosts today are myself, Janine, the Director of Marketing here at Technology Advisors, and Tim Casey, our Bpm'online Practice Lead. If you've joined us before, you're familiar with this platform, you know how to use it. If not, just a quick heads up that you can control the volume through your computer on the left-hand side with that little volume bar. And in addition to that, throughout Tim's presentation, if you have any questions or commentary on what he's discussing, please feel free to enter it into that chat box, and we will get that answered for you. So Tim's going to take us through some information, and then we're going to be talking about some important Bpm'online updates at the end, so stay with us. With that, I'm going to hand the floor over to you, Tim.
All right, thank you very much, Janine, and thank you everybody for joining me today. So like Janine said, I'm going to go through a handful of slides. I'm going to go over my agenda here in just a moment. I want to spend the majority of my time actually within a Bpm'online instance, walking you guys through the setup for a custom section. But before I do that, like I said, I'm going to run through my slides briefly, and then we will go from there. So what we want to do today is we're going to create a custom section in Bpm'online, and we're going to use this in account records. So those of you who were with us for our last user group, we're actually using a very similar use case. So last time we talked about tracking equipment that was installed on a customer location. We set that up as a detail within the account section. This time we're actually going to build on that a little bit. We're going to create a custom section instead. So the big benefit of having a custom section is you're going to get a dedicated list view. You're going to get an analytics page. You're going to have the ability to really report and filter that information in a lot more detail, or a lot more easily, than you would be able to on a detail only. Okay. So we're going to use primarily the section wizard to create this custom section. So in the past, we've done a lot of design work in the advanced settings portion of the system designer, creating our objects or replacement objects directly within the package that we wanted to modify. This time we're going to do the majority of the work through the wizards, and I'll show you guys how that actually generates those objects and replacing objects for you. Okay, so we're going to start by creating the section object. We're going to go ahead and set up the section, our custom sections edit page while we're in the section wizard. From there, we're going to need to set up or customize the list view for the new section we create. We're actually going to register a detail based off of the custom section that we created. So again, last time we created our detail by placing an object directly in our custom package. This time we're going to do everything through the wizards. We're going to go ahead and take that detail that we create and add it to the account section using section wizard once again. From there, we'll need to customize that list view. And then we're actually going to embed a dashboard directly into an account record that reports on the custom section that we've just added to the system. We'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. If you think of anything as we're going, feel free to enter it into the Q&A like Janine mentioned. And then Janine will go over some important upcoming events at the conclusion of the presentation. So custom sections in Bpm'online. So sections are the primary objects where you're going to store your data in BPM. So the section wizard can be used to create these new sections or customize existing sections. We're going to see both use cases today. By default, the options you're going to be presented with within the section wizard, you're going to be able to set all your general properties. You're going to be able to do your edit pages or use the page designer tool to place those fields onto the layout. We'll definitely see that today. One of the newer things that's been added to Bpm'online is the ability to modify your mini pages through the section wizard. This used to be controlled by custom development. So it's actually a huge improvement in my opinion. It makes it a lot easier for those of us who are not developers to modify the mini pages and set where they're used in Bpm'online. Of course, you're going to still be able to set your business rules and set up your dynamic case management. That's all standard functionality that we've seen in the section wizard in the past. And then, of course, modify or create new business processes that are going to be run within a section, whether that's an out-of-the-box section or a custom section. Okay. So we're going to start by creating the necessary objects. Again, we're going to do this all through the wizard today. We're just going to create two objects this time, a section object and a custom lookup object that's going to be created by placing a lookup field onto our new custom section. From there, like I said, we're going to use the section wizard. We're going to set the section's properties, define an edit page, and we're going to use a lookup to the account section to create the relationship to the account section. From there, we're going to define our edit page, and we're also going to need to customize our columns within the list view. Okay, so we're going to use the detail wizard to define the details edit page and register that detail so we can use it in the account section. I just mentioned this, apologize, but we're going to set that list page. We're going to determine what columns need to be added to the list page. When you do create a new section, there's nothing really in the list page except for the name of the record. So that does need to be customized before you deploy that to your system users. We're going to register that detail based on the custom section. Again, this does not require a separate object like we saw on our last user group. Because we're using a single section object, we're able to register that detail without creating any additional objects in our custom package. What we're going to do then is take our new detail object or the detail we've just registered and actually add it into the account section. This is going to be done through the section wizard. We're going to launch section wizard from the account section to modify that out of the box section. And then lastly, we're going to create a dashboard to report on this custom section that we've embedded. So I'm going to actually place a chart directly into an account record. This again is a somewhat newer functionality that Bpm'online has rolled out. So you now have the ability to place charts directly in section edit pages. Somewhat unique to Bpm'online and something I found our customers really like. Okay, so I know I went through the slides pretty quickly, but like I said, I wanted to save the majority of the time to actually demonstrate all of the steps that we just covered. And these slides will be sent out at the conclusion of the presentation for everybody's reference. So bear with me for just a moment, and I'm going to pull up my desktop screen, and I'm going to walk you through how we go about setting up this custom section. Okay. All right, so hopefully everybody can see my screen. What I have pulled up here is a Bpm'online demo instance. So this is just a fresh demo instance. We're basically starting from scratch. I haven't made any modifications yet, but we're going to go ahead and do some on part of this user group. I do have a separate demo instance that I have performed these modifications in, and I may do a little bit of jumping back and forth just while the section wizard finishes saving all of the objects we're about to create, just to show you guys how those are placed in the custom package. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and log in to my new demo instance, and this of course is going to bring me to the main menu. One of the things I want to point out, I've noticed some of our customers have had some trouble with this lately, is that when you're using the wizards in Bpm'online, how it determines where it's going to place your customizations is controlled by your system settings, okay? So in our past user groups, we've come to the system designer page, we go to our advanced settings, and we place either an object or a replacement object directly in whatever package we want to customize. Oh, a sec, I'm getting a little bit of feedback that it's a little difficult to see, so I'm going to zoom in on my browser a bit. This might squish my UI a little bit, but hopefully you guys will be able to read a little easier. Okay, so like I was saying, typically we would go to the advanced settings and place an object or a replacement object directly into the custom package. When you're using the wizard, it automatically places it into a package for you. How that's actually controlled is through your system settings, which is found here on the system designer page under the system setup header. Let me go ahead and click on system settings, and I'll show you guys how to modify that. So those of you who use development instances will typically have, multiple, at least one separate package that's moved to your production instance. And as most of you are aware, the custom package always sits at the bottom of the hierarchy. So what I'm going to do, the easiest way to find a specific system setting that you're looking for is to use the filtration functionality. And the one that controls what package your customizations are being placed into is called the current package system setting. So I'm going to run a quick filter for current, and we see that proper system setting here. If I open that up, what you'll see is it allows you to specify the default value of what package your customizations are going to be stored in. So I am going to target the custom package, and I'm going to go ahead and save that. The other system setting I like to point out while I'm here is something I get a lot of questions about, is you'll notice when you go to make changes within a wizard or within an object directly, Bpm'online always uses a prefix as part of that object name or what it's going to be named in the database. Get a lot of questions about how that's controlled. It's actually controlled through a system setting called prefix for object name. So what I've done is done a quick contain search for the word prefix. If I open that up, we'll see the default value is what's actually controlling that prefix. Okay, it uses USR by default for user. If you worked with technology advisors on your implementation, a lot of times what you'll see is a bunch of objects that have been created with the TAI prefix. I'm going to leave it as the default USR for this demonstration. So I don't actually need to save that because I haven't changed anything. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel. And we can go ahead and get started with the section wizard. All right, so I'm going to go back to my system designer by clicking on the gear icon. And we find the section wizard also listed under the system setup header. So as most of you are aware, if you access the section wizard through your system designer page, like we're about to, that's only used to create new sections, okay? If I want to modify an existing section or one of the out-of-the-box sections, you'd actually launch that section wizard through the view menu in whichever section you want to modify. We'll see that a little bit later when we add this new custom section into the account section. So let's go ahead and click on the section wizard. Like I mentioned on the slides, the very first screen it's going to bring you to is a page where you can set the properties or the settings of your new section, okay? So the very first thing it needs is a title. So this is what's actually going to display in your section panel. What is your new section going to be called? I'm going to do, the use case I'm going to build out today is we're going to be tracking assets that have been placed at a customer location. Okay, so again, very similar to the installed equipment use case we used in our last user group. The code is what it's going to be stored as in the database. You can see it's already included our prefix that was defined in the prefix for object name system setting. Okay, so that cannot be modified. If I did not want to use this prefix, I would need to modify that system setting before I make any changes here in the section wizard. So it's easy to find later. As a best practice, I would recommend giving it the same name or using the same code that you've used in the title. You also need to place your new section into a workplace, okay? You don't necessarily have to do this step. You can see it's not required, but if I want to get to my new section quickly and easily, I can place it directly on one of my existing workplaces. If I forget to do this for whatever reason, you can always come back and make those changes within the workplace setup option on your system designer. Okay. Below that, we see the section pages subheader. So this is where we're actually going to define our edit page, which we'll see in just a moment. And then we see some of those settings around the mini page I mentioned earlier. So this is somewhat new functionality. You're able to define where those mini pages are going to be used. Whether that's going to be used when you add a record, edit a record, or view a record. You can see it's grayed out right now. That's because I haven't actually defined any edit pages yet. Down below that, we have the ability to enable or disable approvals. So approvals are enabled by default in invoices and contracts, I believe. You can, of course, enable or add approvals to any section within Bpm'online, and that includes custom sections. All right. Across here at the top, I mentioned earlier the ability to define business cases or set up the dynamic case management. So this is the functionality that you would see in leads and opportunities within Bpm'online. That can, of course, be added to custom sections as well. I think we're going to cover that in a future user group, but we're not going to be using dynamic case management today, nor are we going to be building any business processes specific to our new asset section. Instead, I'm very simply going to come down here, click the Setup Page option, and define an edit page for our new section. Okay. So Section Wizard has a bit of a new look and feel since they've rolled out these changes. So this might look a little bit different than what most of you or some of you are used to, but all of the functionality is still here. What you'll notice is when you create a brand new section, it automatically puts the name of the record in the profile card, that little left-hand container that you see used in the majority of BPM Online sections. For this section, I don't think I need the profile card, so I'm actually going to remove that name field, and I'm going to move it over here to the header portion of this new edit page we're designing. You'll also notice that when you use Section Wizard to create a custom section, it automatically generates the attachment and note functionality, as well as the feed functionality. And those are placed onto tabs for you as part of your new record, or your new edit page, excuse me. All right, so I removed the name field from the profile card, so it's actually been placed over here in the existing columns with the rest of the system columns that come or are automatically created or inherited anytime you create a new section object. I'm going to move name back out onto the layout, but like I mentioned, I'm going to put it on the header portion of the edit page this time, as I don't want to use the profile card. And that's fine. If I don't have any fields placed on the profile card will not be visible within a record in my new section. I actually want my records to be named by their serial number, so I'm actually going to rename the name field to be called serial number by clicking the pencil icon. Okay. So let's go ahead and drag out all of the information, or create fields for all of the information that we want to track. So one of the things I mentioned on my slides is we're going to need a relationship back to the account section if we want to place this information on an account page. So what I'm going to do is create a new lookup field that references the account section. That's how I'm going to set up that relationship. So I've already dragged the a new lookup field, or a new lookup column, out here onto the blank space of the section wizard, and now I'm going to define the properties for this lookup field. So what are we going to title this? What's going to be the label on this field? I'm going to simply call it account, because we're referencing an account. And in the database, we're going to call it account as well. Keep in mind, we do need our prefix still, which is still being controlled by the system setting. So for our lookup, we're actually going to select an existing lookup, and we're going to directly target the account section by specifying account. Okay? It defaults to use the pop-up window rather than the list view, and that's going to be just fine. If we wanted to make it required read-only or any of these other advanced settings, we'd be able to control that from here as well. The next thing I want to be able to track is when this asset was installed or placed at a customer location. To do that, I'm going to use a date field, and I'll go ahead and drag that out right under the serial number. So we'll go ahead and give this a label, and we'll give it a name for the database as well. Go ahead and save. Also want to track if my equipment or my asset is ever removed from a customer location. So we'll do another date field. And then we need to track what type of asset has been placed at a customer location. So I'm going to do an additional lookup. We're going to call this the equipment type. And this time, rather than select an existing lookup, we're going to create a new lookup, as I have not yet created an object for this lookup list. So when I select Add New Lookup, you'll see my options change slightly. I need to provide a title and a name for my new lookup. I'm just going to simply call this the Equipment Type List. And for the name, we do need to use our prefix, Equipment Type List. For this option, I'm actually going to present that as a list view rather than that magnifying glass pop-up window. Okay. Go ahead and save. I want to track how much we charge for this asset, or how much we charge for the installation. So I'm actually going to use a decimal type field, label that install cost. And then I'm going to use a string or a text field to capture some notes about this asset. Simply title this Notes. And I am going to enable multi-line text. Oops. I am going to enable multi-line text so I can resize that box dynamically. So I go ahead and save this. Let's go ahead and make it look a little nicer. I'll drag the notes out to take a little bit more space. And then I'm not going to add any new tabs or add any new field groups down here at the bottom. I'm going to stick with the standard attachment note functionality as well as my feed. Okay. So let's go ahead and go back to the section wizard now that we've defined our edit page, and we can go ahead and hit save to commit these changes. This will take a moment to save. I noticed one thing I neglected to mention. This little icon that's displayed here is the icon that will show up in your section panel. So if you have a custom icon or some sort of image you want to use, you could select that simply by changing what's displayed here in the section wizard. Okay. So anytime you register a new object using the section wizard, it does take a little bit to save. So what I'm actually going to do is jump over to my other Bpm'online instance where I've actually already created these objects and show you how those are placed within the custom package. Okay. So again, this is an identical Bpm'online demo instance. The only difference is I've already gone through all the steps that I want to cover as part of today's user group. So if I look at my system designer and go to my advanced settings, from here I can look at my configuration tab, and we will see in our custom package that there is an object for the assets section, as well as an object that was generated for the equipment type, lookup or list. Okay. If we inspect this object by using edit, it'll show us that everything has already been set for us. So here we would see the properties of our new object. Again, what its name, what its title, which package it's been placed into, and what it used for its inheritance. All of these settings are filled out automatically when we created this section through the section wizard. Just like we just saw, the system will inherit columns from the base object. So you're always going to have your created on, created by, modified by type information, as well as a unique identifier. And then we see all of the custom fields that we created as well. So our serial number is a relabeled notes or name field, Our notes, our account, relationship, install date, remove date, equipment type, which we can see is properly targeting the equipment type lookup, because that lookup object was created for us automatically as well. Our install costs in our asset notes. Okay. The one big benefit of actually placing an object directly in your package rather than generating it through the section wizard is you do have a bit more control over your field types. So you'll notice, or you may have noticed in our example, that we actually created the install cost field as a decimal type field. Here in my configuration tab, if I look at the properties, I would have the ability to actually switch that from a decimal to a currency type field. So you do have additional field types available when you're working directly within the object editor. If I right-clicked on the column, went to add, we would see some of those options here. So currency is not available in the section wizard, but you can come back to your object and change that information after the fact. Okay. All right. So let me X out of here. I just checked back on my other screen. I wanted to make sure that I had finished saving. It looks like it has, so I can go ahead and click OK. And then we can see how those changes look. To do so, I'm actually going to clear my cache and refresh the page. So bear with me for just a moment. Okay. And what we should see is that our new section will now appear in our sales workspace. And the edit page should be in place as well. So if I look here on my sales workspace, we should see assets down at the bottom, which we do. If I click on the asset section, there will not be any records yet, which is fine. if I go to create a new asset, it should take us to the edit page we just defined, which we do see here. Everything looks correct. So let's go ahead and start by actually importing some records just so we have something to see, and then I'll go ahead and set my list view columns. So I'm actually going to jump back to the system designer. Again, we covered this in our last user group, so I'm going to move through this somewhat quickly. I'm going to go to the data import tool under the import and integration header. The demo instances are always a bit slower than the production instance, so bear with me for just a moment. I suppose this is a good time to check my Q&A and see if I've missed any questions. It does not look like it. Let me actually refresh this page because it's taking an exceptionally long amount of time. Again, they host their demo instances on a separate AWS cloud than their production instances, so they can be, quite a bit slower than what you'd see in a production environment. All right, well, let's give that a chance to finish loading. In the meantime, we'll go ahead and set the list pages column settings now. All right, so I'm back in the asset section that we just created. Again, we don't have any records yet, but I'm going to go ahead and set my columns ahead of time, and then we'll see how those column settings are used once we're able to import my sample records. So anytime you want to change your column settings, you're going to do that through your View menu, and we're going to go to Select Fields to Display. Like I mentioned when I was going through the slides, by default, it's only going to place the name of the record in the list view, which in this instance is not going to be very useful at all, as we're using that field to store serial number information. So I'm going to shrink this way down in size, and let's go ahead and add some additional columns. So what's the most important information? So we want to see which account this asset has been placed at. Let's go ahead and see when it was installed, what type of equipment was used, and how much that install cost. Okay. I think that'll be sufficient. If we did have any records, it would give us a preview of what this columns would look like, but we'll just have to come back once we've done our data import. So I could go ahead and save this, or since I'm a system admin, I could go ahead and use the drop-down and select the Save for All Users, which I would certainly recommend. So anytime you are adding or deploying a custom section, you do want to save these column settings across the entire system. Otherwise, you're going to get a bunch of questions from your users, I'm sure. Okay. So now that that's all set, it looks like my data import has finished loading. So what I'm going to do is select the file that I want to import. And I have a file called installed assets, which I'm going to select. Where do we want to import our data to? I'm going to pick other because this is not account or contact information. And I'm going to search for asset, which I see here. Go ahead and click next. It's going to do some auto mapping for me. So I'm using an Excel file to import this data. It's going to read what I have in my column headers and map those to columns within Bpm'online. Looks like all of my mappings are correct. I actually do not have an installed by column in my asset section, so that does not have mapping, but that is correct. Go ahead and hit next. It's going to ask me what I want to use to look for duplicates. So I have it set right now to search for matching serial numbers. So if it finds a matching serial number in my import file, it'll automatically skip over those records to avoid duplicates. I'm going to go ahead and start this. And it should just take about a minute or less. There's only a handful of records in the file. Okay. So that was pretty quick, and it looks like it has successfully imported 72 records. Go ahead and close this. Now, if I refresh this page, we'll see all of those records displayed here in my list view. Great. So we do have all of the records I just imported, and you can see it's using the column headers that we just set up. If I opened one of these records, again, I could click the blank space and select open, or I can actually use the serial number as a hyperlink, as that's what I've defined as my name field. We would see all of the relevant information about this asset. So we do have our serial number. We have the account it's connected to. Again, this is a lookup, if you guys recall. We have our install date, our remove date, our equipment type, which is a lookup. We can see we set that up as a list view, our install cost, and then any notes. Because this is a multi-string text field, it can dynamically be resized by creating new lines or entering text into the field. Okay. One of the things you may have noticed if you've been paying attention is this is a brand new lookup. Because I'm a system administrator, when you're importing into a lookup field, if it does not find the data that you're importing into that field, it'll automatically add it to the lookup list for you. So there is no need for me to go to the lookup section and add or populate that list. I can simply import the data and it'll add it to the list for me. Okay. Another thing that I really like about BPM is you'll notice there's a tag applied to this record automatically. It actually automatically tags it with the information about your data import, so you can refer back or clear that information out if need be. Very, very useful functionality. Okay. Okay, so now that we have all of our assets, like I said, the next step I want to do is view this information through the lens of a single account. Okay, so what I'm going to do is create a new detail and actually place that within the account section. So let's go ahead and go back to our System Designer. And we're going to go to the Detail Wizard. Again, in our last user group, we had to first create a new object to use the Detail Wizard. This time we're just going to use the same object that we're using for the custom section. So all we need to do is specify the object, which is going to be the Assets object, and provide a title. I'm going to call this the Assets Detail. There is no need to define a separate edit page or any business rules. It's going to use the same edit page that's already been defined for this section. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this. This one should go pretty quickly as it does not need to generate any new objects. Once it finishes saving, we'll go ahead and place it again on the account section using the section wizard. Almost done. Should be just a few more seconds. There we go. All right. So we can go ahead and close this tab, and now we're back at the System Designer page. So I'll very briefly start by looking at an account record. So most of the asset records I imported belong to this account XT group. If I open up its account record, what we see here is just the out-of-the-box account layout. So there have not been any customizations made to the account section to this point. But what I want to do is right here at the top on the Account Info tab is display our new detail so we can see all of the assets that are associated with this account, and also add a chart so we can track how many installs we're doing over time. Okay. So again, to do so, I'm going to use the View menu and open the Section Wizard. Like I said earlier, if you open the Section Wizard from the System Designer, that's used to create new sections. If you want to modify an existing section, you have to open it up from the View menu within that section. Okay. So what we see here is the account edit page. If I wanted to make any changes, I of course could. But the only change I want to make is get my detail here and get my chart here. So I'm going to click the New Detail button. going to ask me which detail I want to add. I'm going to specify the assets detail that we just created. The caption on page is filled out automatically based on the name of the detail. I'm just going to call it assets. The detail column is used to link this information back to an account record, so I need to specify the account column. And for the object column, we're going to use the ID value. Okay. So let's go ahead and save that. You'll see it places it down here at the bottom. I'm going to actually drag that up a little higher so we don't have to scroll all the way down to see it. And now it'll be at the top of the account info tab. If I needed to modify those settings for whatever reason, I could do so by using this pencil icon, and that would allow me to modify my detail settings. I mentioned that the other thing I want to do is add in a chart directly on my account edit page to actually, see some high-level information about those assets. And I can actually do so through this page elements functionality within the section wizard. Again, this is somewhat new functionality. I believe this was added a couple releases ago by Bpm'online. So it's something, not all of our customers have yet taken advantage of, but the ones who have, I think really enjoy it. If I do want to drag a chart out onto the edit page, I do need a field group for that. So I'm going to hit the new field group button. It's going to ask me for a title. So the title is what the field group is called. I get a ton of questions about this, but the title is not required. So you do not need to have a name for your field group. If you don't want any text displayed on the screen, that's fine. And I'm going to drag that up here to the top, and we're going to place this above our asset detail. So let's go ahead and drag a chart element out into my new field group. And that's going to allow us to define what exactly we're charting. Okay. So what are we going to display? We're going to display asset information. So I'm going to specify the asset object. We're going to do a count. And I think I want to use a column chart. And we're going to group our records by their install date. So I'm going to specify the install date here. And we're going to see them grouped by the month and year. Okay, so right now it builds out a preview chart of all of the assets that we have in our database or in our Bpm'online instance. And that's because I have not yet tied it to a specific account. We're going to sort by our grouping order in ascending order, and that's all fine. I don't think I'm going to do a filter, but I do want to associate this information with our section data. I'm going to do so by specifying that we're going to use the account ID. And we'll go ahead and change the color just for fun. All right, let's go ahead and save. I'm going to resize this a bit so it's not so crammed. Oops. Let me make it a good amount bigger. All right, once I have it moved to the right size, go ahead and hit Section Wizard, which should bring us back to the properties. And then from there, we'll be able to save and deploy these changes. Again, the Section Wizard always takes a bit. All right, so let's go ahead and save this. It shouldn't take too long because, again, we're not creating any new objects. When you are creating new objects via Section Wizard, that's when you see those really lengthy load times. It does have to generate those objects and place them into the package for you. So this is probably another good opportunity for me to check our Q&A box. If you have any questions, please feel free to enter them now, and I can address them. Otherwise, we'll have time for questions and answers at the end as well. Okay, doesn't look like we have any questions at this time, so bear with me for just another moment. All this finishes saving our changes, and we'll see how those are reflected within an account record in just a moment.
You know what I was thinking too, Tim, is, and I'll start mentioning this at the beginning of our BPM user groups, but if anyone has topics that they want to see us cover, definitely that's something you can enter in the Q&A box too. We're always open to your suggestions and coming up with different topics that are useful to you when doing these user groups.
Yeah, no, that's a great suggestion. I think, we try to base our user groups on a lot of the feedback we get from our customers or common problems we have our customers come to us with. But if you ever have anything specific, we're very open to those suggestions. All right. So it looks like this has applied its changes. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. I'm going to close my section wizard. And I'm going to go ahead and clear my cache and refresh this page one more time. So what we should see, assuming I set this up correctly, is a chart directly within our account record, as well as our new detail directly within our account record. And it does look like that information has come over properly. So we are able to see a chart of all of our asset installs over time directly within the XT group account record. And we can see all of the different assets that are linked to this account in the new detail we just created. Okay. So just like when we set our section list view, anytime you create a new detail, it needs to have its list view set as well. I could do so by using this little 3-dot action menu, going to column setup. I don't think the notes or account is very useful because I'm within an account record, so they're all going to be linked to this particular account. Instead, I'll do my install cost and equipment type. Go ahead and save that for all users. And we'd see those changes immediately reflected in my list view. Okay. It's a little squished just because I'm a little zoomed in. If I zoomed back out, it'd be a little harder to read, but it wouldn't be so squished together. The chart uses all the same functionality that you see in the dashboard section or on your analytics tab. So you are able to rearrange this information into any chart type on the fly. And you can, of course, drill down on this data as well. So if I wanted to see my installs from November, I could simply click here, hit display data, and I would see those records. Again, charts use column settings as well. So if I wanted to modify the column settings here when I drill down on the data, I could do so through the little gear icon, select my fields to display, and modify this column setting however I liked as well. So let's see, again, our cost. Equipment type. And date. Go ahead and save that for all users. And we'd see those changes reflected next time I drill down on a segment of my chart. I could simply click on the serial number, and that would take me directly to that asset record like we see here. So the other thing, if I find an additional account that had some installs, let's see. If I go to my account list, I know ClearSoft Systems has some. We would see a different chart that would chart only the accounts or the installations or assets that are associated with this specific account. So again, very, very useful functionality, somewhat unique to BPM, the ability to add these charts directly within an edit page that is supported in any section, including custom sections such as the assets. So that actually concludes my demonstration for today. I'm going to go ahead and hand it back over to Deneen to go over a couple upcoming events and notes. And then, of course, I'll stick around for any questions y'all may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, so some of you may have heard, if you haven't, Bpm'online was recognized as the only challenger in Gartner's Magic Quadrant to Salesforce, and as you can see, those big players, those leaders over there, Microsoft and Oracle. So they are really starting to make a significant impact on the market and be seen as large and in charge, and we're excited about that for them. But the main thing we want to talk about today, first of all, we want to thank you for joining us. Next week's user group, if you look on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a couple of links, and that's what is in reference to right here. There's a link for the registration next user group, which is in January, and that will be on how to use new schema tools in Bpm'online. We introduced those. That was something that TAI worked really hard on. And I'm going to try my best to describe this, or I can just hand it to you to describe it, Tim, because I kind of know how to describe it. But it's basically simplifying and making an easy-to-read format for when you're tracking field structure. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It is a custom-built application that's actually put together by one of our developers. So it allows us to quickly and easily identify the object structure or which columns are being used in a Bpm'online environment. It allows you to directly connect to your own BPM instance and pull back a list of objects and which columns or fields are associated with those objects, among other things, of course, which we'll cover within that user group.
Well said. So the registration link for that can be found there. If you need registration links for our user groups at any time, they're also found at the bottom of the home page of our Tech Advisors website. So you'll find a little calendar there with all of our upcoming events. In addition to that, January is going to be a huge month for Bpm'online stuff. On January 30th, Technology Advisors is going to host free Bpm'online training at our offices. It's a full day of training. We're going to be covering administrative functions and the basics of Process Designer. It's valued at more than $2,000, but we're going to do it for free, so it's an opportunity you don't want to miss. Space is limited to the size of our training facility. We have about 30 seats in our training facility, and because the tables in there are bolted to the ground because there's electricity running through them so people can plug in their laptops, we can't exactly rearrange the room either, unfortunately. So we have that limited availability. If you think that's something you and or any of your team members are going to be interested in, I highly recommend registering for that as soon as possible. And then, so it's a two-part event. January 30th is the training at our offices, and then that's going to be from about 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then on the 31st, Bpm'online will be in Chicago, and they're going to be doing their global tour event. That's going to be a half-day event from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. They're going to have expert speakers and panelists that are going to give their best advice for how to accelerate business growth, how to stay ahead of the digital competition. Analysts and trainers from around the country will be at the event to share their expertise, as well as our Bpm'online staff and several of our Tech ADV members. So we really encourage you to take part in this two-day event with us. Both experiences are free. Both are open to your entire company and whoever wants to participate. So the registration link and information for that is also found on the right-hand side of your screen. Of course, if you have any questions or want more information, my contact information should be at the bottom of the screen as well. If not, you can always email marketing@techadv.com, and that comes directly to me. So I'm happy to help with whatever you need. And as Tim said, I will send out the slide deck from today. I will also send out the video recording, and I will include the links as well for registration for the next user group and this epic January two-day event that we're going to be participating in. So if you get that and want to forward it to somebody, you're able to do that. And I think if we don't have any questions right now, we can wrap things up today. I'd just like to thank Tim for an awesome presentation, and we hope that we'll see you guys at the event in January.
Thanks, Dean. Looking forward to seeing everybody in January.